to anyone about this. I didn't want anyone. I mean, I'm being supported by churches as a missionary, as a leader of the church. My family is there only because I've told them I believe in God, and God was central to everything I did. If I told people that I didn't believe in God, what kind of person would I be? What would I have done to my family by taking them there? So it was something I tried to deal with, and it took me more than a decade, almost 20 years, in fact, before I finally realized I didn't believe, and I had to tell somebody about it. So I told my wife one night that, I just don't believe this stuff anymore.
And that has great consequences for your relationship and for your family life.
Yes, it had very severe consequences, and I must say that they were somewhat anticipated. My wife at the time, her faith was and still is extremely strong, and when I told her this, we were sitting at the table. I remember her getting up and going straight to the phone to call all our children so that she could tell them that their father didn't have faith. And we got a divorce, and my children went for quite a bit of time without speaking to me. It's in fact only in the last month or so that two of my children have begun to speak to me again and are talking about having normal relationships with me again. It was a tremendous blow to them.
And a tremendous blow to you.
A severe blow to me. I mean, I have young grandchildren now, and one of them I haven't seen because of this, and it's very devastating that this relationship with my children. We lived. Our family was the entire world. It was our entire universe when we lived for so many years in the jungle together, and to now not have a normal relationship with them was very, very difficult for me for a long time.
You retrain or train more fully as a linguist. Because you can't stay away from these people who have become such a part of your life. And this is where you find yourself in the middle of a blazing row. Explain your theory about language, or what you found about the language of the Pirahãs that so undermined Noam Chomsky's theories.
Well, when I first started working as a professional linguist, and I combined this with my missionary work from the mid-'80s on, I did Chomskyan linguistics. I spent a year at MIT with my office next to Chomsky's. I spoke to Chomsky frequently. My first PhD student, after I moved to the States in 1988 and continued to work in Brazil from the U.S., is now a full professor at MIT in Chomsky's department. And so I felt that was what linguistics was all about. But then I began to realize that certain kinds of structures that I had looked for all these years, in fact, didn't exist. And so in a recent paper, Chomsky claimed that the core of all human language is something that computer scientists, mathematicians, and linguists and others know as recursion. And I began to look at Pirahãs and was in fact in the middle of writing a paper when I saw Chomsky's. And the purpose of my paper was to explain why Pirahãs did not have recursion.
Let's explain it to folk, because it's fundamental, but essentially it's the ability to have several clauses in a sentence. I saw a wonderful example of someone talking, giving us an example of what recursion is. Can you give it as an example, as a device?
Sure. It's the ability to put one linguistic unit inside another linguistic unit of the same type. So take a sentence. If I say the man is tall, that's a sentence. I can put another sentence in that and say the man who is here is tall. And I can put another sentence inside of that and say the man who is here, who has black hair, is tall.
It's the that and the who word that is the hint to recursive devices being used.
That's right, in the clauses, but you can also see recursion in adverb phrases. So if I say John is very tall, John is very, very tall, John is very, 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 very tall, and you can keep repeating. So we see recursion throughout the grammar, and this supposedly produces an infinite number of sentences. And that was what Chomsky has always said is one of the core things that we have to be able to explain as linguists, is how people can produce an infinite number of sentences with a finite brain.
And this is what separates human language from the cat meowing or the bird squawking as a means of communication.
That's what Chomsky has said, although you have to really be careful in your definition of recursion to do that. So one formal, for mathematicians, recursion includes repetition. And so if repetition is recursion, then my dog barks more than one time. And so my dog has recursion in its barking. So you have to rule that out. And if you do that, you get what Chomsky thinks is the core of human language. But I've argued that in Pirahãs, The creativity resides in the storytelling and not in the sentence structure. So there's no evidence for recursion in their sentences.
So never in any example you had in the times that you spent there would you find these kind of devices being used. Does that make their language less complex, very simple, single concept communications? Is that what we're talking about?
Well, at the level of the sentence it does. I mean, it means their sentences are much simpler than the sentences you see in English writing, for example, but not necessarily any simpler than the sentences you see in the conversations of English native speakers, because we don't use recursion very much in normal conversation. But at the level of telling stories, they can put these sentences side by side, and you can see that their interpretations are quite complex. So it's sort of like a crime scene. The reasoning we use there, you see one bit of evidence here, one bit of evidence there, and you put together a story of how the crime was committed. They put their sentences side by side in a text, and they put together an elaborate story that's as complex as any of ours.
You end up then in this great debate with Chomsky, and all and sundry are weighing into it as well. Essentially it comes down to Everett versus Chomsky. How has that debate toed and froed with him?
Well, I mean, I have a long record of correspondence with Chomsky about the issues. He has preferred to let other professors at MIT answer me. So I understand there's a large article about to come out in the #1 journal of linguistics called Language, attacking me at length. And I also have a reply that's going to appear in the same issue of Language, in which I rebut all the criticism. So what amazes me is how emotional people get about it. I mean, in a sense, I'm making a claim that these people lack, something like relative clauses and complex noun phrases. And for the average person, I doubt that would raise many eyebrows. But for linguists, this becomes such a crucial part of who wins the debate about the nature of language that I'm being called just about every name in the book, in addition to regular scientific rebuttals.
In very recursive terms.
That's right.
In terms of the significance of it, I've seen some write, actually, that this idea of a lack of recursion in the language, not in the brain capacity by any means, but in the language of some peoples, has actually been written about by scholars since the 19th century, but it drops out of textbooks because people see it as being racist, as implying some form of inferiority, that you're able to do it because it's all being couched as this debate with Chomsky. What do you say about that?
That's right, and in fact, Steve Pinker has said this about me in print. And what I say is, if you look at grammars that have been written, say, of Australian languages, Nungabuyu, for example, written by the American linguist Jeffrey Heath, if you look through there, you see no examples of recursion, and Heath actually comes very close to saying that they have no recursion. But the reason that they didn't say that is not because they were worried about being labeled as racist, because that's just a grammatical fact. They didn't say it because it wasn't a big deal at the time they were writing their grammars. But now that I've made this claim, people are starting to find evidence very similar to Pirahã in many languages, especially in Australian languages. So it really doesn't have anything to do with whether the people are inferior. I mean, I've made many claims. In fact, we've done cognitive psychological experiments to show that their intelligence in a number of tasks is at least the same as, say, MIT undergraduates doing the same task, and sometimes higher. So it's just a question of their grammar, and I think it's some people who have wanted to cast me as making claims about their society and sort of racist or post-colonial claims, because they don't want to have to answer the scientific arguments.
If Chomsky is wrong, then, about recursion being essential or being fundamental to human language, what makes it language, what is your theory on what it is and how it is?
Well, according to my view of language, and this is shared by more than me, although there are some unique aspects to my view of it, language emerges from a combination of human intelligence, culture, basic constraints on communication. You know, we can only say words one at a time. We can't say 5 words at a time, so we have to have them in a certain order. Once you work out what all the different properties of human language are, the fact that everybody has it is more or less for the same reason that most societies have bows and arrows. It solves a problem.